All right. It says it's preparing the live stream. I'll just give it a minute to give me the all good. And then I'll put the link in the Telegram chat. Okay. Yeah, it looks like we're live. And putting the link in the Telegram chat. All right, cool. And then I can try and check that for comments if anything comes through. Okay, welcome everyone to the Permissionless Software Foundation Technical Steering Meeting. Today is March 16th, 2022. And let's do a quick round of introductions. I am Chris Troutner. I founded the Permissionless Software Foundation, and I maintain fullstack.cash, which is Bitcoin and eCash software as a service. Aaron Sundman, why don't you introduce yourself?
Aaron Sundman, big Bitcoiner for quite some time and loving this space, but I also feel like what Permissionless Software Foundation is bringing to the table is the ability to do all of this stuff without having to get permission, which I think is how innovation ends up happening anyway. So I appreciate the fact that you're going forward doing this. I put a new background in. This is the Michael Saylor background he always uses, so I figured I'd start using this as well sometimes. Hey, thanks.
Nice. Yeah, Stoyan, why don't you introduce yourself?
My name is Stoyan Jekov, and I'm helping with some of the JavaScript libraries for PSF. This is all for me.
Nice. All right, well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Gotta get, where did the, oh, interesting. Somehow I lost the agenda, so let me pull this up. So for anybody who wants to check out this agenda, it is on github.com under the Permissionless Software Foundation group in a repository called TSC for Technical Steering Committee. And we file all of our agendas as issues. And here is today's issue. So as always, these meetings are a chance for us to celebrate our technical achievements over the last couple weeks. And so this is going to be a pretty short agenda just to list all the things that we've accomplished. And then we'll just open it up to a roundtable. We can talk about news or tech or anything that strikes our fancy. Okay, so I've adjusted the format a little bit. So for anybody who wants to see the recording, I'll have a link to the YouTube recording here. As always, there's a link to the Zoom meetings. And our list of core software is starting to get rather long. There's actually a couple more I need to add to this list, but I thought I'd add a scope section that just sort of briefly calls out the software that the PSF maintains and sort of a quick one-sentence blurb of what it is or what it does. So I'll just go through this real quick. We've got the BCH API, which is our REST API for both BCH and eCache. That essentially talks to the full node and the indexers below it and creates a common interface for software to hit. And then BCH.js is our JavaScript library, which interfaces with the REST API and also provides a lot of cryptographic utility things like generating wallets and address and key pairs and signing and verifying signatures. Gatsby Theme BCH wallet is our Gatsby theme. So Gatsby is a framework for building really rich web apps and using React components. And so we have a Gatsby theme to help developers like just get started building their own web app. So the theme can send and receive Bitcoin Cash. It can generate wallets. It can send and receive SLP tokens. And so developers can just leverage that and hit the ground running with a fully functional web wallet and then add whatever additional features they want on top of that. IPFS Cord, so the interplanetary file system, that's IPFS. IPFS Cord is our coordination library. So that's what coordinates. We have a mesh network of servers which is our decentralized Web3 infrastructure. And so IPFS Cord is like the linchpin that keeps that entire mesh network connected. PSF SLP Indexer is our new SLP token indexer. We're going to talk about that a bit today. And then the pay-to-write database, there's both the IPFS pay-to-write database service, which is a REST API, and also a JSON RPC server for interacting with the pay-to-write database. And then the pay-to-write database JavaScript library is a library that JavaScript developers can drop into their app to immediately start reading and writing to the database. So let me jump into the agenda. Basically, there's two sections. There's the tech updates, and then there's the token deck. So I'll start with the tech updates. So IPFS Cord, as I mentioned, is this linchpin of our mesh network. And it's been working great the last few months, but we used OrbitDB to coordinate messages across the network. And that's not really what OrbitDB was designed for. And so we were having serious scaling issues. And so OrbitDB has been removed, and it's been replaced with just a lower level pub sub interface. And it's been pushed out into all the derivative software like the pay-to-write database and the BCH wallet service provider and the consumer. And it's just been out there in production for about a week, and things have been working great. It's like at least a 10x improvement in CPU usage. So it's much more efficient. Really happy with how this all turned out. And it's so much faster. Just like in terms of sending a message across the mesh network, it's like a 10x improvement. Nice. I like that emoji, Stoyan. Okay, so that's that news. So that's going really good. That's pretty much done. The big thing that I've been focusing on this week, and will probably continue to focus on for the next few weeks, is removing SLPDB and replacing it with our PSF SLP indexer. So just to recap real quick, SLPDB was the sort of foundational token indexer that tracks all the tokens on the Bitcoin Cash network. It's also used on the eCash network for all their token infrastructure. And it's having serious scaling issues. It's basically reached the end of its life. It has not been maintained for well over a year. So there's nobody from the original developers not working on it. No one from the community has successfully been able to maintain it. And the PSF raised a flip starter. The BCH community funded us to build a replacement. So that's out in production. It's working great. It runs excellently on a system with 8 gigabytes of RAM. And we have now successfully deprecated SLPDB in BCH API and BCH JS. And so we've just removed all of that infrastructure and baggage, and we're successfully moving forward with the PSF SLP indexer. And guys, feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions or comments. Otherwise, I'll just go through this and we can.
Let me ask one question on that. Like, there were some people that were asking, is the PSF SLP indexer a drop-in replacement for SLPDB, whereas like the APIs are the same and stuff like that? Especially since, there still has to be people using the SLPDB, but they're realizing that it's bad and it's causing issues for them. What would it take for them to decide that the PSF SLP indexer is better or a usable replacement?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in terms of what would it take for them to decide to start using our indexer, I think we just need to use it and be successful using it and build products and businesses on top of it. And that's all the marketing we need to do. SLPDB is getting harder to run every day. And it has been for quite some time. So if there are still people running it, which I think there's probably, other than Fountainhead, I don't know anybody who's running SLPDB. I don't know anyone who can afford to run it, because you need a server with about 64 gigabytes of RAM. And even then it's still going to fall over frequently. It'll, if you have it configured correctly, it can automatically pick itself back up, which is how the simpleledger.info block explorer, the token explorer it goes down for like 10 minutes and you just wait for it to pick itself back up. And that's running on a very beefy system. And so there's only a couple alternative indexers, token indexers. Elipay, the Go Crypto payment system out in Europe, they have their own indexer that they release, but it's like it uses .NET and a SQL database, and which is not really,
it's not the ethos of the community, right? That's not at all the ethos.
Well, we are a JavaScript community, so we're web developers, and so there's REST APIs and JSON and JavaScript and HTML and CSS. Like these are our tools.
Well, so, even larger than that, open source software. I mean, I think that the entire crypto space is based on open source software, not based on SQL Server and .NET stuff. Anyway, that's my own take.
Yeah. So they have open sourced it, but I'm not aware of anyone who is using it other than them. I think maybe that's what Bitcoin.com is running. I'm not sure. I don't have any transparency into that anymore. And so there's just limited options.
Who runs FlexUSD? Because I mean, FlexUSD is one of the issues is maybe one of the main things that is causing issues with SLPDB. Who is actually running that? And they must be running something that's going to handle FlexUSD.
Well, they're really close with Bitcoin.com, and so I don't know what Bitcoin.com is using. They have, in the last few years, they've tended to move away from open source software and move towards closed source software. So whatever they're using, I don't know what it is.
Okay.
But FlexUSD has been very interested in our work with the SLP indexer, and they've been very disappointed that we've made the decision to blacklist their token by default, and they're I'm in talks with them into how they could properly incentivize us to do the massive amount of work that would be required to optimize the indexer further just for their token. I've made it clear that like blacklisting their token makes this indexer work great for all other tokens. It's only their token that is causing problems, and so that if they want us to do exceptional work for their exceptional token, then they're going to have to pay us exceptionally to do that.
I agree. I mean, it is one thing that's causing it. So I'm in agreement. I just wanted to make sure I at least get a chance to talk about that stuff. So
yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. I'm glad. Yeah, I don't want to just sweep that stuff under. Like the thing is there's a happy medium I have to achieve between, like, there's very real technical reasons for why we've made the decisions we've made, and I don't shy away from that, but I also don't want to have the same conversation over and over again. But I also don't. This isn't an emotional thing. I'm not doing this because I hate FlexUSD. This is numbers and engineering and logic and incentive, and there's no room for emotion here. And this is the proper place for us to have this discussion.
Right.
And so if anybody watches this later, I invite anybody to come talk about this if they have another point of view they want to put forward.
Yeah, it's a Discord channel for the PSF indexer to be able to do it. I don't know if we want to put a comment down there. I don't know where the best place to comment is on this specific thing, but it seems like that's still the best place from what I've seen.
Yeah, well, yeah, let's talk about that. If anybody is not already in the Permissionless Software Foundation Telegram channel, the easiest way to get to it is to go to psfoundation.cash, scroll all the way to the bottom, and there's a link to our Telegram channel. If you go there, there is a separate Telegram channel dedicated just to the SLP indexer, but we can send you there. But so if anybody's watching this and they want to know how to contribute to this conversation, that's the way to do it.
Excellent.
Chris, I also have a question. What will be the query language for this indexer? Are you planning to support this old, some strange language that the old SLPDB had, or it will be some GraphQL? What will be the?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's very different. So yeah, the old SLPDB had a query language called JQ, and it was based on MongoDB, and it was this very archaic, it was Turing complete, so you could do these loops, and that's part of the computational issues with SLPDB is like you could basically like DOS an SLPDB server by carefully crafting a query that would just have infinite loops. And so we moved away from MongoDB. We're using LevelDB, which is much faster and more performant. And so if you go to psf-slp-indexer.fullstack.cache, you can see the API interface for the indexer. So this is just talking straight to the indexer. So it's got this REST interface. So it's got 4 interface, really just 3, because one of them's just a status to see if how this indexer's doing, if it's caught up to the tip of the chain. So really it just looks at, you can query address balances. So that'll give you a list of all the UTXOs, as well as the token, like a summary of the token balances, and as well as the transaction history for an address. So that's one endpoint. There is a transaction, so you can query the details of a transaction, of a token transaction, or any transaction for that matter. And if it is a token transaction, it will hydrate the inputs and the outputs with the quantities of token and the token IDs. And then at the bottom, it will give you info about the token, like what the genesis was, if it's valid. This is usually what a lot of software is curious when you query a transaction. You just want to know if it's valid or not. And just information like that. And then there's a token stats endpoint that will give you like information about the genesis info about the token. So it's decimals, if the minting baton is active, the number of tokens in circulation, the number of tokens that have been burned. And then there's I don't think it's documented in here yet, but you can actually, there's a second variable you can put into this query where it'll give you all the token transactions for that token that have ever been made. So if you want to, that information is valuable in certain situations, but it can be a lot of info. So we don't include it by default. So these 3 endpoints, when I set out designing the indexer, I've been using SLPDB since it was created, very intensely, writing some of these JQ queries and creating different API interfaces for it. And so this is really like 95% of the information that SLPDB is used for is captured here in just these 3 API calls. And what's cool is, so I just did a test, and it takes about a week to re-index. If you have the transaction map, which you can generate, it's just a map of all the SLP transactions, so that when you can re-index the indexer, and you can skip, because you already know what all the transactions that you're interested in, you can ignore all the non-SLP transactions. So it's much faster to re-index. So if there is like some information that someone wants that's not in here, they can add it and then quickly re-index. Well, quickly, it be in a week. Re-index, and customize. Like they could add another REST API endpoint that queries some other information. But I mean, the key word in SLP is simple. So there's not a lot of other information to query. Basically, I think everything that anybody would need is here. And then if I miss something, it's open source. So I'd love to see pull requests, if it's justified. But and then I also plan to add a JSON RPC interface so that you can query the same endpoints over IPFS to a remote server.
I was thinking maybe I don't know, for integration with Gatsby, maybe the GraphQL was a good choice to have on top of this REST, maybe, because you can easy integrate it with maybe explorers or wallets if there's a GraphQL interface.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of expertise with GraphQL, but I know that a lot of people love it. I've also heard some nightmares in terms of maintaining a like a REST API server that includes GraphQL queries and scaling it. Like it's basically the same problem that the JQ language is. It's such a rich query language that you can quickly run into scaling issues because front end developers, when they make these GraphQL queries, they're not necessarily thinking about the computational requirements, needed to run the query. That's what the backend developer has to worry about. And we don't have that. We don't. If this was a company, then the front end developers could talk to the back end developers and they could get this all worked out. But the way that we work is we just kind of throw things out into space and wait for people to complain about it. So, but that being said, I like your intuition and your instinct about GraphQL. I think that would be a very, very healthy addition to this. I just personally don't know much about it. So, but if someone wants to, thinks that's important and wants to work on that, I'm totally open to it.
It will be interesting. I think one time I talk about this the graph. It's company or organization or something. All their like services creating subgraphs, means a subset of GraphQL to some to some service. So they're mostly working with Ethereum compatible stuff, but not only. I saw recently they added like Near and some other blockchains. So it will be interesting if they can use this REST API and create like a subgraph for in their service. So how to see, it will be easy if there's some standard like front end or I don't know entry point using this like REST, but for GraphQL users. So it can be separate from this structure. They can be run by anyone who wants this. Like if they want GraphQL, okay, run the server, use it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, I would love it if we got the attention of the company behind the graph. The data's there if anybody wants to independently index this stuff. And I think if someone just really loves GraphQL and they think that that's absolutely needed here, I love the idea of that being like a separate software box, like a separate software layer that's maybe built on top of this. So you just build like a GraphQL interface on top of what exists here. I'm open to any and all of it. It's just that GraphQL is not in my field of expertise. So I would definitely need some help on that one. Let's see. Get back to so that's the indexer. Okay, and then again to riff on the indexer here, the full stack API Explorer page that is right here. So that's at fullstack.cache explore-bchn. And you can actually pull up pages for, testnet's not supported anymore. I need to remove that. And then there's the eCache ABC chain that these endpoints also work for. But if you scroll down to the bottom, there's this new PSF SLP section. And you can just exercise those 4 endpoints. So if you have, say, a token transaction ID and you want to just check it real quick, and say the simple ledger.info block explorer is down, you can go to here and hit this post and try it out, and then just replace this with your own token ID and hit execute. And so this is like a live interaction with the token indexer. So this is just a real handy. It's like it does the same things that a block explorer would do, just without the visual things. So you can just make these live REST API calls to the indexer and just sort of get a feel for it. So that's been updated. That's available now. Let's go here. Okay, so this next one, I'm pretty excited about this, even though it's a little buggy. I'm still going to demo it. So I had Daniel update Gatsby Theme BCH wallet. So that's our Gatsby theme. And then we also have the BCH wallet starter. And in fact, if you go to our GitHub page, they're pinned, so they're very easy to find. Gatsby theme BCH wallet, that's our Gatsby theme, and then BCH wallet starter is our Gatsby starter. For basically lets you fork it and just start your own website. They now include this ability. If you go to the config area on the backend server, by default, it defaults to free bch.fullstack.cache, which is the Web3 sort of interface. But now we have this additional drop-down list of other backend servers that you can connect to. So if one's down, you can just easily switch to another one, and keep on chugging along. And that list is here in this gist. So I've set up, I maintain three servers there, and this really cuts to the difference between the Web 2 and the Web 3 infrastructure. So the Web 2 infrastructure is a server that we pay for, or servers that we pay for in the cloud. And if we stop paying, it evaporates. And if the government doesn't like what we're doing, they send a letter to the server host, and we may not even know about it. And our stuff just evaporates again. So these are three servers running in three different residential homes on standard computers with a fiber optic connection, preferably. And so these are three that I maintain. So the one I have here at home, and then two of friends that I have that have let me just set computers up in their closet because they have a nice fiber optic connection. So this is the difference. Is I'm not paying for these servers, and I also don't have rate limits because I like bring it on. It's fiber optic connection. I don't, I also don't need rate limits because of the latency of going through IPFS is sort of its own natural rate limit. Mm-hmm. So anyways, like anybody can set up to run these three servers is only costing me $5 a month, because all I need is a $5 a month cloud connected server to proxy incoming data to these other home computers over IPFS. So instead of paying $250 a month for this equivalent cloud infrastructure, I'm paying $5 a month, and I own the hardware, so it's on me to maintain it. But my monthly cost is only $5, and I can provide all this value to the community. So I'm pretty excited about that. So if anybody else wants to do the same thing, set up a $5 proxy cloud server, and they have a nice fiber optic connection and a $400 desktop computer to run a cache stack, I can add you to this list. And everybody who's running this web wallet, either developing their own software using our demo or the Android app that we are maintaining as well, those servers will just magically appear in this list. And so if someone's using the web app and it's not working properly, they can just go to the config tab, switch to a different backend server, and just keep trying until they can achieve, keep it working. So this is resilience. There's efficiency, and the opposite of efficiency is oftentimes resilience. And so this is going to make our web apps very resilient, and I'm very excited about that.
I wish I could get the fiber here. I'm just not it still runs pretty well, but it's certainly not fiber where I'm at, and I don't think I'm available to it. But I'll be working on that, because I do have it running, and it runs pretty well, the software. And one of the reasons I'm glad that you swapped out the SLPDB, because I certainly have the $400 computer, but I don't have the bandwidth right now.
Yeah, so I'm not able to get fiber here as well, but I was able to purchase a second internet line. So I have a second internet that's just dedicated. So I don't care. It can't. It's segregated from this. So that's why it's not interfering with the Zoom call. And that turned out to be a lot cheaper than running all the cloud infrastructure. And I can expand it at no additional cost, in terms of the value I'm able to pipe over that pipe. So yeah, pretty excited about that. Updated via the gist. We'll have a new Android app out, the APK file out soon that will include this update, so that you'll be able to do that within the Android app. Okay, so that concludes basically the tech update. So I'll just give an update on the decks. I've updated the specifications and the developer docs. So in particular, there's the AVIX decks, the BCH decks, and the eCache decks. And so I am personally working on the BCH decks. Gary is working on the Avalanche decks, and he's gotten ahead of me. And so now I'm in the process of porting his features and bringing the Bitcoin Cash and eCache decks up to feature parity with that. And so as a step in that direction, I've updated these developer docs. So if you go to BCH decks, it's in the dev docs directory, and there's a couple of readmes. There's a specification document that calls out like the database models and the REST API endpoints and how they're used. The developer documentation is more of like a high level description. So I'll just go over this real briefly. This image sort of lays out the data flow. So there's a client, which is either like a web app or a command line app like PSF BCH wallet. And then the BCH DEX is actually composed of a local Mongo database and REST API, and then a local instance of the pay-to-write database. And so these are actually set up in a Docker container. So the final production version of this will be, a web server, the BCH DEX, and a pay-to-write database. It'll be 3 containers, and they'll spin up, and then you'll just navigate to it with a web browser, and that'll be your user interface. But what this is showing is that the client doesn't interact directly with the pay-to-write database. The BCH DEX sits as a middleman in between them. And so the pay-to-write database is it's basically a blockchain-like database. It's got the censorship-resistant qualities of a blockchain. And the data coordinates using consensus rules like a blockchain, but you're able to store way more data in it than you would on a blockchain. And so what BCH DEX does is it has the ability to pull that data and filter that data. And so whoever's running this BCH DEX, whether they're running it for themselves or for a community of users, they can have better control over the look and feel. They can moderate things, they can filter out things that they don't want their users to see, but everyone's free to run their own version and see it however they want to see it. So it's sort of moderation as a service. That's the idea here. But ultimately, the pay-to-write database is this highly censorship resistant. That the data is there and no one can take the data down because it's got these blockchain-like properties. And I thought it was worth just spending a minute on these definitions. So this process of order creation, and there's 3 phases. There's you make an order, you take an order, and then you accept an order. So an order can be either a buy or a sell order. So you can place an order because you want to buy tokens or because you want to sell tokens. But there's basically these 3 phases. Someone makes an offer and they put that out there into the database, and then you browse the orders and you take an offer by making a counter offer, and then that original maker will either accept or reject by signing the final transaction and broadcasting it. And so this makes it trustless and atomic. So I wanted to define those because a lot of people are like question mark when they hear those words. Trustless means that neither party can screw over the other party because they each have an opportunity to review the terms of the trade. And once the taker creates the partially signed transaction, the maker cannot change it. It's all basically fixed. All they can do is sign it and broadcast it, or not do that. And so that also, so that's what makes it trustless. And then it's also atomic in that the trade happens in one single transaction. So it either happens or it doesn't happen. There's no middle state where the trade can get stuck or censored. There's no intermediary that the state can apply pressure to. And then there's other definitions here, which I've kind of covered, is like an order is internal to the system. So when like what you do, the way the DEX works is it has its own wallet. And this is why it's more tailored for like individual usage rather than like a .com website running a website with multiple users. Is the DEX in its current incarnation and for the foreseeable future, it has its own wallet. So you put the tokens you want to sell into the app's wallet, and then you'll be able to create an offer. And the difference between an offer and an order is the order tracks like, so let's say you want to sell 10 Trout tokens. Well, the app's going to take those 10 tokens and they're going to put them into a new address, like it has an HD wallet. So it's going to create a new address key pair and move those tokens and create what I call a segregated UTXO. So they're separate and they exist there. And then the app's going to manage that. And so that's what makes an order different from an offer. Is an order is internal and it's tracking things like the HD index where those tokens live while they're waiting for someone to take the other side of the order. The offer is the public part that goes out to the pay to write database, and everybody sees that, and all the BCH dexes on the network track the offers. And then that's what you browse with the web user interface. Is you browse all the offers on the network. If you find one that you like, you can hit take, and that'll generate a counter offer, which is a partially signed transaction that goes to the pay to write database. And then the maker's BCH Dex software will be it already knows the orders that it's managing, so it'll watch for incoming counter offers. And when it sees one, it'll check to make sure that no funny business is going on. And if it passes that check, it'll sign it and broadcast it, and the trade's complete. And so, yeah, that's basically it in a nutshell. If anybody wants to get more nitty gritty details, they're down there, but we're pretty close. I've got a lot of other work that I need to do first, but before I can keep pushing forward with this, but I'm really excited to be able to I have some ideas for some NFTs that I shared with you guys in the last meeting and be able to put them up for sale on the marketplace.
And this is one of the things I'll just say is one of the big differences is that there isn't requiring this huge liquidity pool of stuff. Like most dexes have to have a whole bunch of people and a lot of, sometimes millions of dollars of backing before it even works. This allows even small type thing, even like 17 Trout tokens to go out there without having to have a huge liquidity. So this is a really new concept, I think, in DEX. Is that I don't know what other things are out there similar to this, but it really makes it fast and simple. And once it's done, clearly it's hard to know how it'll go, what the direction is, because technology is used by different people in different ways.
Yeah, this type of trustless atomic trading, it's been theorized since the early days of Bitcoin, but there's been very few actual implementations of this. I mean, I didn't come up with this. Vin Armani didn't come up with it, but he polished this idea and I took it from him.
Yeah, that's what I first saw. It was his initial thing. I'm like, but you're actually making it come to real rather than just sitting on the blockchain. I mean, his I think it was all inside the op return.
Yeah, and his idea of the implementation is much simpler because everything's on chain. You don't need this extra piece of infrastructure, which is the pay to write database. But at scale, I don't think that is I don't like the idea of putting all that data on the blockchain. Plus, by maintaining this, this is just one application of the pay to write database. And that's this that I've gone over this before. The pay to write database, it's both a solution to this data problem, but it's also a monetization generation thing for our community. Is if we are in charge of maintaining this pay to write database and it's used for applications like this, but certainly not limited to this, that is going to generate a cash flow, which will complete the economic circle that we need to really make our goal of incentivizing open source work with tokens a reality.
Right. Excellent.
Yeah. And so I think the first way that this is going to get used, or the most like the lowest hanging fruit here once this DEX is fully functional, is just like a stable coin and BCH. Like someone could just set one of these up and be like, yeah, I'll offer $100 of stable coins at 1% above the spot price of BCH, and then I'll offer another $100 at 2% above the spot price, and another $100 at 5%. So you just set these orders, and then you walk away, and the app will handle everything. You check on it every once in a while to see if you need to top up your balances. It just creates this permissionless, very low friction way to move in and out of the market.
Why is the MongoDB needed? You mentioned that now one of the containers will have also MongoDB. Why?
Yeah, so there's a couple places where MongoDB is used. There's a MongoDB in the PagerDuty database, and then there's MongoDB in BCHDEX. So BCHDEX only has the MongoDB. And so it needs a database. It doesn't necessarily need to be MongoDB, but the app needs to have its own database for tracking those internal orders. And so that's why it uses it. The PagerDuty database uses a MongoDB because basically to counterbalance some of the flaws in OrbitDB is because when you start OrbitDB, it's going to check all the entries in its database to see like what it has and what it doesn't have in order to synchronize with all the other Orbit DBs on the network, because this peer-to-peer database that synchronizes. And part of the what the biggest change we made to Orbit DB to create the PagerDuty database is the consensus rule, which says you have to provide proof of burn in order to write to the database. And that's a very intensive process to do that check. So we cache the results in MongoDB. So when OrbitDB starts up, and it does this every time it starts up, rather than going through and re-verifying all the entries in the database, it just checks the local MongoDB cache to be like, oh yeah, this was valid. I already checked that. I don't need to check it again. And so it has a much, much faster startup with Orbit. So that's why we need a local MongoDB in the PagerDuty database.
Was it just saving some state? Would it be better, for example, to have for Redis? You know this guy. Why you need document storage?
Yeah. I mean, we could use a different database. My experience is that Mongo works pretty good when it's small, and in these cases, it's pretty small. We could use a different database. I don't know if Redis would like something like LevelDB or does Redis save data to the drive, or is it just an in-memory database?
It can be saved.
It can be saved.
You can use also Tokyo or something. I was just thinking, do you need JSON document storage or just key value storage? So if it's document storage, Mongo is maybe the better guy. But if it's just key value, there is better options like Redis or Tokyo, Kyoto, something.
Yeah, and that might be an upgrade we do down the road. I don't think we're going to have scaling issues for quite a while, and then that's when we can revisit this. The biggest reason why I chose to go with Mongo was just legacy. This software is based on software that was already packaged with the MongoDB database, and I had all the code like user management and rate limiting and a lot of the other REST API stuff. Like this was part of a boilerplate that I've used for years, and that includes MongoDB. So I used it because I didn't want to take the extra effort to. I wasn't like starting this from scratch. I was starting it from a fairly already complete boilerplate app, and so it's just I'm always looking for shortcuts. So that's mainly why we use Mongo. And again, like I said, I don't think we're going to run into the kinds of scaling issues that are typical for MongoDB in this use case. But if we do, I think pretty much everything is essentially a key, or could, if it's not a key value store right now, but everything could be converted to a key value store fairly easily. And then we could use something like Redis or LevelDB. But yeah, I don't want to fix something if it's not broke.
Yeah. No, because we was talking before that somebody can run just a Raspberry Pi with this BCH DEX. So in this case, maybe Mongo will be a little difficult to run on this.
Well, it'll run on a Raspberry Pi 4. The Mongo 4.4 requires a 64-bit system. You can't run it on a Pi 2, and it doesn't. Pi 3s can run 64-bit, but not very well. But the Pi 4 will run MongoDB just fine. I actually ran this app on my Pi 400. But yeah, I agree. Like that, it kind of sucks that if we spent a little time optimizing this, then yeah, it could run on, like, say, a Pi 3 or maybe even a Pi 2 or equivalent computation. Let's see. Yeah, and so there's a take button. I don't have a demo for that yet, but there's a UI where you can browse the orders coming in, and then you can hit this take button to take the other side of the order. So that UI has been generated. We don't really have the logic behind it working or everything wired up yet. And yeah, BCH DEX is rapidly catching up to feature parity with AVX DEX, and then I've updated the BCH.js examples repository. It now has like an eCache directory, and I did that because the main two differences right now from a developer perspective between BCH and eCache is the redenomination from Satoshis to bits, and the address prefix from Bitcoin Cash to eCache on an address. And so those examples just sort of show how to work around those two changes. And so with that being identified, I'm now confident in that once we get this working on BCH, it's a very simple fork to have it run on eCache with just making those two simple changes. So that's the idea. Like that's the eventual goal, is to have the DEX running on Avalanche, Bitcoin Cash, and eCache. Hopefully by that point, we'll have a multi-sig minting workflow worked out so that we can set up a minting counselor for the PSF token. And then we've already got the bridges code complete so that we could move the PSF token across the bridges for the three blockchains. And I think if we had all those in place, then the PSF token would become incredibly valuable as a medium for value exchange across the three chains, which can easily be bought and sold on any of the three chains. But we really need to have multi-signature minting on all three chains so that there's no one person for the state to apply pressure against if they don't like that.
Yeah, let's see. I take a look on the Sam's try. I was hoping he will come today so we can talk more, because he was just like
so close.
The last minute on the previous meeting.
Yeah.
So yeah. He was trying to use like Secure signatures for the multi-sig. So maybe if he try with these elliptic curves, it can be maybe possible to create a transaction. I don't know.
Yeah.
And
I want to dig deeper into those unit tests that you found that seem to be doing multi-signature transactions. I just haven't had time to do that. It looks like there might be something there that we can use already.
Yeah, maybe it's there was a lot. They was so deep inside some, like, I don't know, and there was like P to MS, like, I don't know, very strange.
Yeah, because there's what's the normal one? Pay to
P2SH.
Pay to script hash, and then there's pay to pub hash, and then there's like 4 or 5 of them. But like, almost really it's just the pay to script hash and pay to pub hash that are yeah, I think pay to pub hash is the normal one, and pay to script hash is when you're like a multi-sig when you're doing a script.
I think it's P2SH means P2 script hash.
Yeah.
The example that I taught from the SOPGS.
Yeah.
But there was like a example for sending to multi-signature wallet, maybe. That's why
there's
it was
pay to
named
multi-sig, and that's the one that's not used. Like that's the old school way of doing multi-sig. If I'm remembering it correctly, like I'm also fuzzy on this. I always relied on Gabriel to keep this stuff straight. But yeah, we'll get it figured out. We'll get it figured out in time. But those are the 3 major pieces. Like if we could get the bridges and the DEX and the multi-sig all working, then man, I think we could make the PSF token incredibly valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And uncensorable. That's it's not worth anything if you can't make it, if the state can just come along and arrest one of us.
Yeah, now half of the world is already like censored.
Yeah.
All Russia, Canada trackers, everybody's censored in some way.
Yeah, this deplatforming thing is getting so nuts. I mean, I shared this with you, but I'll just repeat it. Like as soon as we get the DEX rolled out, things have been progressing really well with the mutable data, and so I love the idea of creating an NFT where that becomes. I mean, this is really just a play on the hackathon thing that you created, Stoyan, for the decentralized DNS. Like that same idea of creating this tree structure, so it's like all the content that I put out, you could look up one single group token ID and find all the NFTs that were generated from it. And each one could be like this video could be an NFT. And then it could list like, here's where it lives on YouTube. Here's where it lives on Library. Here's where it lives on Filecoin. And all the different places where you can find this content. I just think that's so needed right now. And I mean, I think the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Like I think that all this deplatforming and censorship is coming from a place of good intent, but it's just the outcomes are horrible. Like nobody knows what's going on. Nobody can trust it. I don't trust the mainstream media. I don't trust the government. I don't think anybody does, because we have no way like of fact checking the fact checkers. We have no way of getting to some objective fact that is either true or false, because all the content that you need to get to that point has been deplatformed.
Yeah, we was talking with Aaron previous week exactly about these things, and yeah, I saw some videos like one of the first thing when the financial system is crashing is losing the trust, because all of the fiat ID is based on trust. Mm-hmm. Like if you trust the government, the banks, then the fiat system can. But if you don't trust them, it's like, yeah, this money not see.
Yeah.
If you don't trust the bank, the financial system is crushed. So
I've been, there's a couple Telegram channels I've been following of Canadians a lot. That whole trucker like thing, not the trucker thing, but the government response to the trucker thing, caused a lot of Canadians to get the hell out of Canada, and a lot of them are choosing to go to Mexico. And Playa del Carmen on the Yucatan Peninsula in particular, I've discovered has a really healthy population of both US and Canadian expatriates, and a very healthy cryptocurrency adoption down there. You can go to bars and rent apartments and do it and live off of crypto down there. And it's Playa del Carmen. It's on the Yucatan Peninsula. So Mexico kind of is like shaped like a question, or like a J, or like a fish hook. And so there's the South America, like south of Mexico is South America, but Mexico kind of heads east out into the Gulf of Mexico.
Right. Toward Cuba.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just looked
Yeah,
it
it
up.
kind of
Wow.
points at Cuba and Florida. And so that point is the Yucatan Peninsula. And so Playa del Carmen is on the east coast there. And that's high on my list of places to visit the next couple of years.
Yeah, that looks fantastic. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I've been looking for, like, what's an interesting place, especially one that is crypto focused.
Well, the town itself, Playa del Carmen, there's a couple Telegram channels that I just managed to, like, through chance, like get in there, and so they have like meetups where they educate each other about different crypto projects and buy and sell crypto, and then there's like this whole real estate side of it, and it's really, yeah, it's really got me intrigued and has my curiosity piqued in terms of places to go and practice my Spanish and live off my crypto.
and it's nowhere near the border where there's lots of issues going on. You know, the U.S. Mexico border. I spent some time in Ciudad Obregon and some of these other cities, and it's not a safe spot anywhere in between. This is a much better place to be.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's just one spot. So that's what I love. You know, we were talking about, what got me talking about this was that what you mentioned, Stoyan, about how fiat currency is all based on trust. And the thing that the media wants you to focus on, which at the current moment is Ukraine and Russia, is like, if you ignore that and start looking around, like, it's getting so impressive how the grassroots adoption, like, I didn't even know about Playa del Carmen, and it's a big thing. And I knew about Argentina. I knew that there was a lot of grassroots adoption in Argentina, and it's just and I'm just really excited about all this adoption and how powerless the governments are to stop it. You know, the minute they think that they have something to focus on, there's 100 other things happening that they don't even know about.
Yeah, we was talking with Aaron, the other Aaron, Schumacher.
Too many
but like, before some time, I saw one video about the bubble in Japan. If you remember, there was like some Riemann shock or something. But it mostly, the recent facts are that the bankers themselves make this because they wanted to change the system from the worldwide bank system to the more like current one. So they start giving a lot of money to the people, but after this they wanted this money back, so the system crashed. And in this video was mentioned that every reform, financial reform, need a crisis, because everybody's like the old stuff.
Right.
So if you look on the current status, it's exactly the same. It's like, this printing of new money was just to, everybody know it's crazy, but it's continue to crush the system so they can implement the new one. And my concern was that the new one will be SBDC, which is the new way for the government to be to follow these changes in crypto, which is like pretty scary. But yeah, I think it will happen soon. It's in China, it's already fact, because they can, the CCP just tell them, okay, from tomorrow, CDBC. But in US, it's very sneaky. Like they put it in some like news, something documents, and it's slowly going, but it will be here soon.
Yeah, this is why I'm so focused on South America, because every fiat currency dies the same way. There's no variation to it. Every fiat currency dies exactly the same way. They go through the same phases, and we're currently in that, like, way too far to turn back now. And the big thing that's looming is that the U.S. and Russia, both, because they've decided to not play together anymore, they have to now reconfigure all their supply chains to be more locally resilient. And that's going to cause a lot of pain. It's going to take a decade to do that. And South America has already been operating that way. They don't have to change anything. They're like virtually, other than their dollar denominated debts, which a lot of them have, infrastructure, like in terms of infrastructure and supply chains, like none of that has to change. And so I really think like globally, like in terms of freedom and economic opportunity over the next decade, South America is where it's going to be. That's my feeling. Like that's for knowing what I know, that's how I'm calling it.
Wow.
So
That's great.
Yeah, I
But,
think
got a rocky
that was
road in front of
interesting about the South Sea. For example, Venezuela have one of the biggest oil, I think, fields, but
Yeah.
they can be processed only in US, I think. There's some special machines.
Yeah, they
needed.
don't have refineries, and they
Yeah.
seem to be incapable of keeping the refineries they do have operational. And I mean, like if they could somehow get their act together and solve that, they would have done that. So all they have is crude. They have a lot of it.
They nationalized all those industries. So it was only people in Venezuela that could run them. All the US people left that knew what they were doing. So yeah, it's just gone downhill to where
Well, you know, this is another like super fascinating thing that has gotten zero media coverage. Is my understanding is that Iran has refineries. They also have some crude, but they don't have nearly as much as Venezuela. Venezuela has crude, but no refineries. They're both under sanctions from the US. So they've been sending cargo ships back and forth and exchanging refined oil for crude oil and making up the difference in Bitcoin. Because both countries are comfortable using BTC Bitcoin. So my understanding is they use Bitcoin to settle they basically trade refined for crude. And then if whatever the difference is settled in Bitcoin.
wow.
Yeah, I think the China is getting their oil from Iran. So I think maybe they will be the first to implement this digital yuan system, which is replacement for the SWIFT. So yeah, scary stuff, but we can keep like doing our crypto.
Yeah. Well, you know, the thing is I believe that a sovereign country is a sovereign country and they get to do whatever they want to do. But I also, to counterbalance the extreme horrible end of that, now that a citizen in any country can liquidate their net worth and literally walk out of the country with their net worth in their head, is going to put a check on that sort of extreme, like I don't want to be in Russia right now. I don't want to be in North Korea. Like I still believe that they are sovereign countries that should be able to make whatever rules they want, but I also believe that their citizens should be allowed to leave.
Well, that is, I mean, I don't know if you've read the Sovereign Individual book. I mean, that one right there, it seemed like science fiction at the time. Mm-hmm. Now
I'm actually reading it right now.
Yeah, it really feels like it can happen because of exactly what you just said. Up to that point, there was no mechanism. There was no way to make it real. So I'm glad you're reading that, because that one right there convinced me entirely about the importance of the individual sovereignty of the person and how the government should be looking for how to treat those as customers and not prisoners. Like
this is why Playa del Carmen caught my attention, because this is like a manifestation of that exact idea. Is like Canadians, like not a ton of Canadians, but even 1% is a huge number. I mean, they're leaving, and people and it's not just Canada, like every country, like people are leaving the countries they don't like. They're taking their money with them, and they're going to the countries they do like.
The sad part about it too, for the country, Canada specifically, would be it's not the poor people that are leaving.
Right.
It's not people that have no money. It's people that have money and means to do it. And so they're going to be, and are industrious. I mean, there's a lot of things that are missing once you lose those people.
Yeah. And I think that's the future we're moving into. And it's pretty scary, but it also, I mean, it's just like we're caught there. existential philosophy has this notion of thrownness, that you're like, we're thrown into history. Like the period in history in which we're born is not one of the things we get to choose. Like it's all about freedom and choice in existential philosophy, but that's not one of the things you get to choose. The parents you're born to, also not something you get to choose. The economic conditions in which you're born to, not something you get to choose. But you do have to like decide what to do with these things over the course of your life. And so yeah, I mean, so in a way, this whole circle in the toilet bowl that fiat currency is doing right now, we don't get to choose. And like, I don't think it matters who the president is. Like, I think that the die has been cast, that, you know, the front of the train's already hit the cliff, but we're in the caboose waiting for the shockwave to hit us. You know, there's no change in the facts, like, and there's no change in the trend. Just as individuals, we can decide like which car on the train to be in or to jump off the train. Yeah. All right. Well, that's probably a good place to wrap this up. Wrap it up on a high note, you know.
You know, I'll just say, you know, the other side of this is that's one of the reasons why this whole foundation is here, because you want to also give not only a mechanism for money to be able to transfer, but like even Alex Gladstein wrote the book that he just put out called Check Your Financial Privilege, right? We live in the US, we can transact with anybody. That's not true for everybody in the world. How do you build something that you can communicate, that you can transact, doesn't matter where you live, without all of this? So, I mean, I think we all need to check not only our financial privilege, but our ability to communicate privilege. Mm-hmm. You know, I think those are more important than, you know, the other privileges that have been locked out people over time. Because we don't choose, you need to figure out some way. And this is one of the things that we're working on with the PSF. I mean, that's why it's important. Yeah.
Yeah. Juan Bennett, the founder of Protocol Labs and IPFS and Filecoin, he talks about superpowers. He's got a couple YouTube videos where he talks about how software is like a superpower. And so, you know, I think our jobs as technologists is to not check our privilege, but to make sure that we can give those privileges to everyone. You know, to make it possible for someone in mainland China to send an encrypted message as well as money to someone outside of China. You know, and that's what IPFS and that's what our technology is setting the stage for.
Absolutely. The check the privilege is the people that say, oh, you don't need this stuff. We don't need that stuff. No, think about your position. If you're not aware of it, then you're not going to think that this is anything. So I just don't mean that we need to, but I feel like this is exactly what we're focusing on.
Right. All right. Well, let's go ahead and wrap it up. I think I'm just going to end the Zoom call because I'm not sure how to do what Aaron does, which is like, so right on. Appreciate you guys making it. And I'll see you in a couple of weeks, and I'll be online in the meantime.
You can get a big piece of paper and just put it close to the camera. It will be a very analog way to finish.
I am not a videographer. I leave that to Shoemaker. All right. Cheers, guys.